right, good afternoon, everybody. Glad everyone could be here. I know it's the middle of the workday for most of us, so appreciate it. Carrie, would you mind doing a roll call for us, please?
Mr. Steinberg?
Here.
Mrs. Roach?
Here.
Mr. White? Here. Mr. Whittington?
Here.
Mayor Norton?
Here. Thank you, Carrie. All right, we have one item on the agenda today that's new business, work session to review roles and responsibilities of appointed and elected officials. So Mr. Bromland, I think you've got something prepared. I will kick it off to you.
Sounds great. I just want to echo what Mayor Norton said. Mayor Norton, City Council, and City staff, I appreciate everybody's time. I have been reflecting on this meeting leading up to it, and I think this is just a really good opportunity for us to address some housekeeping items, something that I think that we should schedule annually moving forward. We've got a great group of staff and council, and as a city administrator, I'm just kind of noticing, I can tell when things start to get a little off track, and I feel like we've maybe hit that point and we just need to get back on track, and so this is just a good refresher for all of us. So I'm just going to kick it off by going through some things that I think are important for us to know. I've invited the city attorney, Chris Kennedy, to be here to help facilitate the discussion, answer questions, and then I think we should just open it up and have a conversation. If anybody has questions, comments or concerns, I think we are a good group and we can just, have a good conversation. So I'll go ahead and get started. And I did put a copy of my memo in front of your spots on the council table. And I also have it up on the, I guess I don't have it up on the screen here. I think I have it. 1 second. I don't know if I have an extra copy for Trent. Trent, I will get you an extra copy. I'm sorry I ran out. But I will put it up here on the big screen. So 1 moment here. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're meeting here this afternoon to talk about roles and responsibilities of both appointed and elected officials. So this includes city council and city staff. The reason we need to meet is because the relationship between elected officials and staff is important, because how we interact with each other has the impact to affect the overall success of the city. We need to establish clear roles, boundaries, communication, and trust between council and staff, and that's essential to ensure that the city is running smoothly and that we continue to be a great place to work and serve. While it can be uncomfortable, we do need to address conflicts, and I just wanted to note, however small they are, directly and immediately, and try not to let them fester. And then next, I'll just talk a little bit about Eagle Lake and its structure. So we're a statutory city, Plan A. We have an elected mayor and council and an appointed administrator and staff as well. The council appoints, hires all personnel, and then in addition, the council can appoint independent boards and commissions to advise the council on issues, and those would be like Personnel Committee, Planning Commission, Economic Development Authority, and so forth. The council retains all administrative and legislative authority, but delegates all day-to-day operations to the city administrator, except hiring and firing. Council members' statutory duties are to be performed almost without exception by the council as a whole. So that means outside of a council meeting, individual council members don't have the authority to be directing staff. It's as a whole body, you have that authority. Council members should devote their official time to problems of basic policy and then act as liaisons between the city and general public. And I think the most important single responsibility of a council person is participation at council meetings, making sure that you're a team, that you're putting forth good recommendations, making seconding motions, and so forth. Again, as individuals, council members have no administrative authority. This means that council members cannot give orders to or supervise city employees unless specifically directed to do so by the council. And then some other roles of individual council members. They include devoting time to problems of basic policy. So if there's issues within the city, addressing that through policy, acting as a liaison between the city and the general public. 2 members of the council or the mayor may call a special meeting of the city council. The council sets and interprets rules governing its own proceedings. You exercise all the powers of cities that the law does not delegate to others. Legislate for the city, direct the enforcement of city ordinances, appoint administrative personnel, transact city business, manage the city's financial operations, appoint members of boards, conduct the city's intergovernmental affairs, protect the welfare of the city, provide community leadership and other specific powers relative to the city. And then next, the role of the mayor is to be the official head of the city. The mayor speaks for both the council and the community as a whole, executes official documents, serves as a providing officer at council meetings, has the ability to declare local emergencies, call special and emergency council meetings, is a signatory on the city's checking account, and then many other powers relative to the city. The mayor has all the powers and duties for office of council member in addition to those of mayor. And then next we'll talk about city administrator. The city administrator is the chief administrative officer of the city and responsible to the council for the proper administration of the duties set forth in chapter 12 of city council, and I did include a copy of that with my memo. I'll just kind of summarize here some of those duties. They include serving as the city clerk, or performing the statutory city clerk and treasurer responsibilities, supervising the administration of all departments and offices of the city, delegating duties and responsibilities of city department supervisors. The city administrator shall be the personnel officer of the city and is charged with implementing adopted personnel policies, doing reviews of city employees, and scheduling work. And as I mentioned, one of the committees before is the personnel committee, so the city administrator sits on that committee as a staff support, but does not have any voting power with that respect. And then, as you know, city administrator prepares and submits annual budget, charged with keeping the council advised of the financial condition of the city, making recommendations as necessary, overall purchasing agent for the city, making sure our departments are making purchases in line with all requirements, making recommendations to the city council, coordinating activities of the city's consultants. And the city administrator represents the city at all official functions as directed by the city council, and then maintains good public relations with the citizens of the community. And then next we'll go on to department heads. Department heads report to the city administrator. The assignment of work duties and scheduling work is a responsibility of the supervisor, subject to the approval of the city administrator and city council. Supervisors are responsible for maintaining compliance with city standards of employee conduct. And then lastly, I just included a copy of our chain of command from the personnel policy. After working in government for going on 16 years now, I can tell you that I firmly believe that if we can just make sure that we always follow chain of command, I think that really solves a lot of our issues with staff or council being unclear about roles and responsibilities, and just addressing issues. So I gave a copy of the policy to our staff. We had a staff meeting. That was one of the things we talked about. And per our policy, the employees have to address all questions, suggestions, concerns, and problems with their supervisor first. Just because the supervisor might not agree with something doesn't mean that gives you the green light to go on to the next step. But if an employee feels that a question, suggestion, concern, or problem has not been addressed, the employee can arrange a meeting with the city administrator, and then if it doesn't get resolved, the city administrator, the employee can request a meeting with the personnel committee. But the caveat is that the meeting would be arranged by the city administrator, so we just always keep all levels of supervisors in the loop so that nobody is caught off guard or by surprise, and just making sure that we keep those lines of communications open. So as I mentioned, we did a refresher on chain of command at a recent staff meeting. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, respect for chain of command, I feel is just critical to us being successful and having trust with the city. We don't want employees, going to jumping ranks and going to the city council versus me, or coming to me before talking to their supervisor if there's an issue, because we just want to make sure everybody's kept in the loop for communication and there's trust. And then lastly, I just want to, for the information that I have here, we all have important roles to play, and that's why I think it's so important to have this meeting today, that we just talk about our roles and responsibilities, make sure we're all on the same page, because we all have important work to do, and we aren't doing what we're supposed to be doing, or we get off track. We're not being efficient, and it's taking time away from the important work that the community expects and deserves from us. So that's all I have. I wanted to open it up to you because I know some of you have brought forth some really good questions with being on the council and different committees and commissions and what roles are. So I'll turn back to you or if the city attorney has anything that he wants to add. But I just wanted to kind of kick off our meeting and have just a basic understanding of everybody's, roles and responsibilities and go from there. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bromeland. Questions, comments, thoughts? Mr. Kennedy?
I'm waiting for questions. I assume that they'll be directed to me, so. The role of the city council, I mean, you hear all the different language and things of that. It becomes very complicated. And, part of the problem comes in is what people learn in civics class. We're very used to the government, either the state or what the federal government looks like, where you have the legislative, you have the judicial, you have the, basically administrative and those functions. And for a city's perspective, you fill all three of those functions. And it's part of the reason that the city has to be kind of structured the way that it is with administration and things of that nature, because unlike a private company, because I always like telling councils, you're pretty much like the board of directors of a company. You're there to kind of set overall writing issues. You're there to kind of be the place of last resort. But unlike private companies, you have a lot of statutory and constitutional things that we have to follow, such as due process and other things of that nature. And sometimes that's kind of the reason for the structure the way that it may be. I've had cities that over time have gone away from having individual council members that were kind of the point persons for departments because of issues that created. Specifically that there was this idea that council person had authority to do something with that department or tell that department to do something, and the truth of the matter is each of you get 1/5 of a vote on everything. So once we get to a consensus, and that includes the mayor, we can't go further than that. So from the council's perspective, what your role is to kind of override and give this kind of legislative idea of what the city wants to do. You can control the police functions by saying how much we're going to enforce the ordinances or not enforce the ordinances. You certainly have all the ties over the purse strings in determining where the money is going to go or not. But you also are there to perform the judicial function that if there's problems along the way, you have to be there as an independent party that's going to be able to make those kind of decisions. Whether we see that in nuisance property where they may be given a citation and then the property owner comes up to the city and says, I don't agree with what staff did. Well, if we had a council member that was early in that process, they couldn't be part of the judicial process at the end. And so you kind of act as a stopgap in a lot of those type of things. And I think that's where some of the functions and stuff take place. My concern is always for city councils, particularly over the last 3 or 4 years, is just that everybody understands what you're signing or what you're putting under your oath. You're all well aware of what's happening at Get Thunder with the mayor, where you wanted to be very active. And they didn't have a city administrator, they only had a city clerk, but it's very unclear what he was able to do and what he was not able to do. And, he did things he thought were probably in the best interest of the city, and they very well may be, but he's currently facing criminal charges. And one of the charges he's facing is that he did not follow what the oath is, which basically means that the city code says this is what the structure is, and they were doing something else. So it's important just that from a council's perspective that instead of having individual council members doing things, that you're working as a whole so that there's not also miscommunication going on. It's kind of the stuff that's coming there. I think Jennifer touched on all of that, and to some degree, I think I'm speaking just to not have silence. Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm just really glad that we're having the discussion. We're opening the lines of communication. I know I'm probably a big offender of some of this. Well, but I was trained differently with township because we didn't have a city administrator. Mm-hmm. And we did exactly what you were describing, Chris, where everyone kind of had their area of expertise that they worked on. So that's been a real change for me from what I was used to. Like, oh wow, I just have to sit back and let Jennifer, do her job. And I think we're in a good place there, but I know something that I'll just open this up with what I always worry about is that if I'm pestering you too much or if I'm asking questions and things like that, should I be silently waiting? And I know that you will deliver me what I need to know. But I don't know, maybe that's something we could all discuss too, like what is an appropriate amount of reaching out with questions versus how do we do that, when do we do that, that kind of thing, because I'm sure we all know what it's like to get distracted when you're on a roll at work, and I don't want to be part of that either, so.
No, I think that's great, and as long as, no, I don't see any issue with, I think that's great. If council has questions or concerns, by all means, let staff know. That is never a bother. I think only time we run into a situation is if a council expected something to get done that staff didn't have authority to do, that needed to get approved at a council meeting. But no, I think just giving, giving the administrator questions or routing questions for departments through the administrator is perfectly fine. Keep doing that. There's nothing wrong with that, so. And trust me, I will let you know if I feel like, I'll tell you, I'm swamped, I can't do this right now. I'm not afraid to tell you guys that, so don't worry about that.
Okay.
Madam Mayor and council members, you should feel free to ask the city administrator or myself questions that you may have. You can give comments and things of that nature. What can happen is you can't ask for direction or say that something's supposed to be done that takes council approval. The part that I would remind everybody of, it's better that that's a one-on-one type of direction. If you put everybody on the council, giving them notice of that, that's fine. They get the notice of it. But the first person who sets, back, reply all, now you have a council meeting. And you have a council meeting that you didn't properly give notice of. And that's sometimes a concern. And that's sometimes a huge concern when we get something from, a resident of the city, which I think actually everybody in the council recently received something. It's tempting to reply to, the city administrator and say, well, what are we doing about this or something else? But as soon as that happens, that becomes that kind of serial meeting. So just for, and that's where sometimes people get, it happens a lot, so I can't tell you that if you do that, you're going to get hit with it. But if you do, it becomes a problem.
Well, I can say too, I think I probably trained you guys really well. I put on every email, and if I don't, I put, please do not hit reply all. This is intended for one-way communication. And this council haven't had any issues with that. So, and when we do get those, if we get a notice, Chris is absolutely right, though. That's exactly how this stuff happens, and it's not intentional. That's exactly how it happens, is you think it's innocent, you're responding all. But, so when we do get emails, that's a great point to bring up from the public, and they address it to the city council, because why would they be expected to know any different that they can't do that? Just know that I'll respond, to you and probably say don't, I might not say don't reply all, but just I'll handle it and then I'll advise you afterwards, so.
And
that's really good.
I certainly didn't mean to imply that we have any problems with this council. But I did have that issue with the North Mankato Council a couple of years ago, where we had one of our older members who would acknowledge every time she received an email, which became problematic. So.
One question that came up from a council member, which I thought was a really good question, is could we get a definition of each of the committees? Because we don't have that. I did look for that. We don't have that in our code or in a policy format. So that is something we probably should get defined, is what is the role of the EDA? What is the role of the Planning Commission Personnel Committee? So that's something we could work on. Yep, we have a personnel policy. Yes, we do. Yep. Hopefully, we try to review that periodically. I think we just sent that to the COG not that long ago, but it's basically built off the League of Minnesota Cities model personnel policy, and then we just tailor it to Eagle Lake. But yeah, we make sure that everybody looks at that annually.
After that information comes back from COG, it would not be a bad idea for the council to take a look at that and review it. Lake Crystal's in the process of doing it. Waseca's in the process of doing that. They get outdated. There'll be lots of things that may be happening in practice that aren't necessarily there. Not that there's ever a good time, because you have plenty of stuff to do, but it's better to do it in February and March than when we get to May and start looking at budget again for next year.
So I guess the only thing I have is Andrew, Mike, and I probably chat the most out of all this, just because I help out down at the park. I just want to make sure that's okay. It's more of just like letting them know and them letting me know what I can use, what I can't use, and all that type of stuff. But there are some times where it's like, hey, we need to do this, need to do that. It has nothing to do with undermining anybody other than just letting them know what I see when I'm down there. So I'm just making sure that's okay. It's kind of a different situation, but
It's okay for the council members to have communications with staff other than the city administrator, and going through it or not. What everybody just has to realize is that they're contacting you as being a council member or basically as a constituent. They're not contacting you as in a special role with any special authority for the city. So with all that stuff being said, yeah, I mean, it's, the issues when they're talking about this is what we need for work or this is what we need for supplies and things of that nature would normally come up in front of the council as a whole are going to be okay. Where you probably run into problems if they start going into grievances about their supervisor, about the city administrator, or even about the other members of the council that are not politically based but are based on their job thing of that nature, that it probably needs then to go up the chain of command to be through that process. And you want to step away from that because, again, eventually you may be one of the individuals that's making the final decision as to, whether the city administrator did something right or that staff person did something right or wrong.
Something I guess that I've always kind of tried to use as a general rule of thumb is that if a council member talks to an employee about something that, if it's something insignificant, you don't need to do it, but I think either we could ask the department head or the council person just to send a recap to the city administrator, just for the communication purposes, so that, it comes out later that, well, the council told me to do this or suggested I do this, and, then we have that breakdown of communication again. So that's just where I always think, it doesn't have to be on everything, but if there's, like, we're gonna be filling the rink next week, that's probably something that somebody should let me know about so I can communicate it, because we do get questions at City Hall. I'm just giving an example of something I can think of, so. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's kind of how I look at it, just, everybody just keep everybody in the loop and. Yeah, no, you can, like yep, like this. Yeah, like the city attorney said,
Right.
council can absolutely talk to staff.
I mean, if there's things like potholes and you want to bring those to the attention of, the streets, you can do that. You can't tell them to go fill this pothole, and do this rather than do something else. Now, at the next council meeting, you guys can do that. Working and say, yeah, we want you to deal with this issue, and you put the other on the back burner, but just an individual council member can't do that. And when we had Chief Cop, that was fairly normal that the mayors would have contact with him or other council members about certain nuisance properties and arrest. And, he would talk to the city administrator and sometimes myself, or he would go to the neighbors and try to do those enforcement type of things. So where you're not acting for anything that needs direct individual action, you can look at that as long as you're making them aware of it. But, so there's no fast and hard line because they're all going to be kind of wavering. You're just going to have to trust your judgment on that. But if it's making decisions that are going to be coming up in front of the council or that the council should be making, or a decision that the supervisor or city administrator should be making, the response in talking to staff is, I took that notes and then pass it along and have that discussion with the appropriate party.
And I also think it's important to point out that there is absolutely nothing wrong with council members being friends with staff. That is not what this is about. It's more like the city attorney had given an example of, if an employee, talks to a council person about a grievance, doesn't like one of their coworkers, doesn't like the supervisor, doesn't like a council person, those would be inappropriate conversations. But there's absolutely no reason you can't be friends with city staff. I just want to clarify that. So you shouldn't feel awkward that you can't talk to staff. That's definitely not the point. So.
Yeah, I get much more concerned about, safety issues and negligence issues. Like somebody say, should we put up lights at the city hall on the tree and go up on the thing? And one of the council members or the mayor says, yeah, that sounds great. They go ahead and do this in fall, well, then they think the city gave permission when the city didn't necessarily give permission. And that seems silly, but quite frankly, that's a number of the issues the cities have come problems
Not that
with.
silly, if you know me. Ask the guys.
And I think sometimes too, from staff's perspective, it can be a little bit confusing to just, a council member mentioned something, does that mean I have to do it right now? Because I think maybe that's a fair thing to say. Sometimes if a council member points something out to you, you feel like you need to get that addressed, but that's where, staff, we just have that communication, talk to me, do we need to do this now or should it wait until the council meeting is something that takes the full council to approve?
Yeah, and the answer that I'm sure Jennifer knows to that is if council member brings something up to somebody on staff, they should take notice of it the same way we would with any citizen. If the council says to do something, they need to give that deference and priority.
So just to make sure I'm clear, because I know during the fall, I emailed you, Jennifer, about a tree limb that was hanging over about to fall, and I don't think I sent it to Andrew, just making sure that it didn't seem like I was telling him to take down, so I sent it just to you. You sent it back, CC'd me or whatever, or sent it to Andrew. Should we be sending things like that, FYI pothole, FYI this, or this might be a situation, should that go right to Andrew? Should it go with both of you guys, go to you, like how, just so we're,
Personally, I think it could go to me, and you could copy the department head. I like to be in the loop too, because we get lots of calls or people stopping at City Hall, and it's just nice to know, just like, and it's good for Public Works, I try to communicate, share as much information as possible. I'm not perfect, but I like staff to be in the know too. So I think emailing me, copying a department head, or emailing the department head and copying me is
so putting
fine,
both of you
too.
guys on the
Yep.
email is appropriate, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, if you have something like that, it makes sense to make the city administration or city hall aware of it, because if there's gonna be a call or there's gonna be a public, complaints about it, it's good to have them ahead. For all intents and purposes, outside of council nights, Jennifer's gonna be your point person and it's gonna be the public face of the city, so it's just beneficial that, she can say, we're either dealing with this, we're aware of this, or, no, I haven't heard of this, and then if she says that and they go to, streets or they go to the police or somebody else and say, well, yeah, we're aware of this, then they kind of wonder what's happening with the city.
So Jennifer is the data center. Got it.
You can use me as a clearinghouse. That's really what the city administrator is supposed to be for the council and for staff to be kind of that liaison. So you're exactly right.
Yeah, she's public relations for the city, so, for good or bad.
And the other thing too is if there's issues, if you have an issue with me or with, staff, I try to have a thick skin, but just let me know. I want to do a better job. I want to improve. So let me know. It's so much better to hear it directly from a council person than hearing it from, 3 or 4 other people, or you start hearing stuff in the community. So just make sure that direct communication is so important. And I'll do the same to the council if I have an issue with any of you. And I try to do the same with staff. If there's an issue, try to address it, as soon as possible.
And then, well, that's always a good thing if for some reason, and I know Jennifer won't necessarily like this part, but if there is some kind of reason or problem there, that a council member has with the city administrator, the two things that are appropriate. A, you can always contact me. B, you can go to the personnel committee. What you can't do is can't start communicating amongst yourselves and trying to come to a resolution. My father, years ago, back in the 80s, was on the city council in Mankato. And you may know Bassett Drive or something. There was a city manager or city administrator by the name of Bill Bassett, and the council there did what would be completely illegal now. Is that you had 3 of the 5 council members that all kind of came together at different times, and each had a reason for firing him, and then realized that they had 3 votes. So that can't happen. Outside of being in a public area of that, but you can have a personal committee or something else that's going to take a look at that. And we just, Jennifer makes a lot of sense, and I know what she's looking for. She wants the city to run as smoothly as possible, but if the council does have concerns, there's other directions that you can go. And it doesn't have to necessarily be me, it's whoever your city council or whoever your attorney is at that point. Because I'm the only person on that, you have that kind of chart that has the city council here, city administrator, then staff and heads. I'm on that dotted line off to the side. I represent the council and the city as to whatever that may mean.
I was just gonna bring up something, and maybe this is just my own lack of understanding, but this stuck out to me. The most important single responsibility of a council person is participation at council meetings. Participation, to me, is a lot more than we sit here from 6 o'clock until that meeting adjourns. But I'd love to know, what you guys think of that. What is participation? And that's to everybody, because I know I feel like I'm always over, but I don't know.
I think participation has to be that the council members are being actively interested in what's happening in front of them. I don't think that you need to require that they're actively asking questions or going through things of that nature. So I mean, if somebody's just going through the motions, they're probably not fulfilling what is meant for their duties, though you can't really do much about it. But if somebody just happens to be, particularly quiet or sitting there, doesn't mean they're not necessarily doing their duties. Justice Thomas on the U.S. Supreme Court has always had a history of not asking questions or not doing anything. Doesn't mean he's not active or doesn't understand what's going on. He just has a different role of how he does it. So a lot of that's going to be just individual, how you take a look at that. So you need to be active, you need to be participating, you want to do things. The reason for doing things in the council is so that the council as a whole is kind of aware of it. And you're not having somebody who's going off and doing things that maybe, that they think is important, but the council, 3 of the 5 members don't.
Yeah, I just think, we're here one evening, usually a month, and I want to make sure we're all coming here, we're prepared, we know what we're going to be discussing. A lot of those questions, we have them ready, that kind of thing, because it's a better use of time if we're ready and not going, oh, really? Well, that's, not that we do that, but I just want to make sure everyone's really prepared. And if they have, maybe if they have a clarifying question, I'm sure, Jennifer, you may appreciate that question ahead of time and be able to answer
Definitely.
it. So,
Yep. It's
Okay.
always nice to have those questions in advance, not so that I can come to the meeting and look like I know the answer off the top of my head, but just so that I don't waste your time and I don't have to say, oh, I'll have to, look into it and get back to you. But, and the reason I put that in there and why I think that from my perspective is because of why being at a council meeting is so important for the council, because that's where you guys can adopt ordinances, change policy, create policy, legislate, do all that stuff. I think it's important to have everybody show up. You guys do, that's great. Be actively engaged, and that's where you can, as a whole, can make a difference for our community. That's why I put that in there. So.
no, I appreciate it. You gave me a aha moment. So, thank you. All right. Any other questions, comments? As usual, I'm talking to be an extrovert, but I don't want anyone to not get a chance if they have things they want to talk about.
I can say the one thing that's hard for me, and I don't feel like I'm alone, and I had it happen quite a bit, not in the last 3 months, but earlier in the year, in the summer, with a specific department or person was, that fine line with being approachable and people coming to me with questions or concerns, and also being, I don't want to say not my problem, but did you talk to these people first, so not making it become my problem, and then I get too far into it and can't get out. So I think for me, it's learning that fine line of being aware of it, but not always being the one that has to handle that situation. And it's balancing that and knowing when it is my problem, when it's not my problem type of thing.
I think that's incredibly important for all the council members. There is that fine line. A lot of times, if you feel you're getting closer crossing the line, the answer just may be that you'll discuss this with Jennifer, you'll discuss this with me, or you'll take a look into it or see what's happening with their concerns, or take it up with the personnel committee. But if we don't have an idea what the personnel committee is going to do, that may be something that the council wants to take a look at over the next year. I mean, I might keep giving you projects, but it is nice to have an idea what the personnel committee in particular is supposed to do. Parks, we can have it to be much more broad-based. The EDA and Planning Commission are pretty much based on statute, so we don't have to have something that's going to be, really, detailed as to how they're going to operate. We know what they're going to be looking at. But what you need to remember for all these committees is that they're there just to give additional information or more advice, to the council, and particularly the personnel committee is there to, let the council as a whole kind of have an idea whether or not there's, issues with a particular employer going forward, without necessarily having to have closed meetings or having the council have to deal with those at a open, meeting where it may not be particularly pleasant.
Maybe I'll just kind of go off of what your comments, Beth, too, and just let everybody know my kind of reiterate what we already talked about too, but just so you know, my perspective with this chain of command is a very important concept for me. And as a city administrator, I am going to hold staff to, I'm gonna hold them accountable. I've given everybody notice, and we just don't have time to waste on dealing with stuff, all these little side things or side complaints. If there's an issue, I want to follow the proper channels, and that's what I'm asking the council to, just that the council respect that as well, redirect employees. I know it's hard, but, if we don't follow that, it's very hard for a city administrator to do their job. And you have charged me with lots of important things our citizens expect, work to get done, and I can't do that if I'm having to put out fires and be defending this and that when I don't even know that these things are going on. So I just want everybody to know, staff's aware of it, council's aware of it. I'll handle it as a disciplinary matter if it persists, and I don't think it's going to get to that point, but it is absolutely imperative that we follow chain of command. So just want to put everybody, so everybody has my perspective, and I've worked in government, like I said, 16 years now, and I feel very strongly that we have to follow that, or we will have nothing but chaos, distrust, and we're not going to get work done. So.
How does the,
Based on other cities, what will happen is you'll be working with, the city administrator, and then they'll be kind of putting things to them. For all intents and purposes, Blue Earth County has indicated that they'll have somebody at your meetings, and you can, that then you'll be able to answer questions. Lake Crystal doesn't have the department being run by the sheriff's department, but does have the chief. And they do have one of the deputies there who's kind of the chief role, who's at every meeting and will kind of address the questions. In that particular case, for a number of reasons, he's out there looking at some nuisance properties arrest. Partly that's because we have an officer that's come back who was injured and is coming back part-time and can't necessarily do patrol. But they, so you will have somewhere you can address them and do that. If the question is, we get to a point where one of the officers or deputies, you're telling them to do something and the sheriff's telling them not to, they have to listen to the sheriff. And then our recourse in that situation is to cancel the contract. But the sheriff is independently elected, has his own statutory authority, and they are they're deputies of the sheriff's department.
From a staff perspective, I view the kind of being I don't know if this is right or not, city attorney, correct me, I kind of view myself as being a liaison with the lieutenant for kind of the day-to-day stuff, but I think absolutely the council, as the city attorney said, can have that ability to talk to the lieutenant about things you're seeing or concerns, and just exactly what the city attorney said. But I feel like that's kind of where on our end, we'll kind of work some of that stuff out when we get to know the lieutenant. We're going to have a meeting coming up in January with Public Works, Fire, myself, and kind of figure out some of that stuff. And it's going to be a learning curve, but I think everything the city attorney said, and then I just wanted to add a little bit for my perspective.
Liaison's a very good word. She'll be trying to coordinate the things between the two departments, unlike when you had the police department where she had authority to take a more specific action, or at least on paper.
Anything else? Going once, going twice. All right, we have no other items on the agenda. If we're all feeling good, I will take a motion to adjourn from anyone willing to give it.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.